Good morning, everyone. We have Travis back again, and today we're going to be talking about cognitive distortions and how they can affect your mental well-being. I do want to offer the disclaimer that this is not medical advice. This is purely for educational purposes, and please see a therapist, a psychiatrist. That what we're going to cover today is not a panacea and it's not a cure-all. So if you need medication, take your medication, etc. But Travis, go ahead and again introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about how these cognitive distortions and learning these, why it's so important.
Yeah, so I'm Travis Goodman. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist out of California. Um, been practicing now for 8, 9 years, something like that. And so these, cognitive distortions or negative thinking patterns, I see this pretty much every day working with clients. Um, there's not a day that goes by that I don't see someone new, a new client that walks in my door where one, if not all of these, that individual is struggling with and has been struggling with, because the reality is a lot of us, myself included, at one point, like, would get stuck in this type of thinking. And so what I do like about this list and this, which we're going to jump into in a quick second here, is that it gives you language to begin to identify and target and become aware of this way of thinking. So as we start to learn the language, as you start to see it, a lot of us here, as I start to go through this list, you might say, "Oh, that's me," or "That's me." So I'm curious, as I start going through this list, if drop it in the chat or comment, which one, "Oh, I struggle with this one," or for sure that one, or that one, or that one, or that one, because you're going to find that you might relate to quite a few of these. And by the way, it's not. I tell all my clients this: hey, if you relate to all of these, that's awesome. Don't take it like if I relate to more or less that I'm worse off or better off. No, I think if you relate to all of them or one of them, the fact that you can identify what it is the first step into really shifting this negative thinking. So quick history though, this has been on for a long time. These negative thinking patterns are nothing new. In fact, Aaron Beck, who is known as the father of cognitive behavioral therapy, back in the 60s, was doing research on people who were depressed. And, which a lot of psychology, a lot of these great thinkers around like in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and kind of started doing research and trying to understand why people were struggling and what's going on for them. And since then, it's evolved quite. But Aaron Beck really was the founder of this, and it was part of his theory on depression, which later came out as cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And some of you might know what CBT is. If you do, put a thumbs up or say, yes, I know what that is. If you don't know, that's okay too. But really what cognitive distortions are really unhelpful ways of thinking. Unhelpful thinking styles is another way to think of them. It's because our brain is always interpreting the world around us. It's always filtering out our world. It's always kind of taking in information and processing it and then making sense of it, whether we're consciously aware of it or kind of unconsciously, whether we're mindful about it or if we're mindless about it. It doesn't matter. It's always processing information. We can't shut that off. And so what Aaron Beck said is essentially our brain sometimes, when we're like depressed, for example, it'll take shortcuts. It'll kind of to help quickly process information, and often it's not always accurate, but our brain might think it's true. It might think it's fully accurate. But what he found in his patients and clients that he worked with was that actually there's a lot of misinterpretations that people are claiming as being truth, but actually it's completely false and based on not reality. And since then, there's another big well-known name. In fact, Bridget and I were talking about this just moments ago in the green room. David Burns, who kind of took Aaron Beck's work, and he wrote a book that she's holding up called Feeling Good Together. He's got another book called Feeling Good. He's got a few, but really took Aaron Beck's work and expanded on this list, so to speak, of these distortions or negative thinking patterns and made them a little more user-friendly. He kind of actually took a few of Aaron Beck's initial unhelpful thinking patterns and expanded them into like 2 or 3 just to kind of make more sense of it, and he wrote some amazing books, and the one, again, that Bridget held up is great. Like, if you are a kind of self-learner and kind of like work, are able to kind of take in information, learn your own, that's an excellent book. Feeling Good is also another great book, that he has. I mean, these are excellent
Yeah,
works.
I just want to add real quick. I'm going to add to Hoopla. You can get them for free. The Feeling Good on Hoopla, which is a audio version of the library. So you get a library card, and then Hoopla is an application you can download. But I love these books so much. They have
Mm,
helped me tremendously. I definitely engaged in some cognitive distortions, and I've read Feeling Good and I've read Feeling Good together,
mm,
and I can definitely tell everybody that's watching that it will definitely help improve your relationships, and it'll help you grow as a person, especially like, things with relationships. um One of these books covers that, a distortion that we do. This isn't one for personal, but there's a distortion that a lot of times individuals do in relationships, which is mind reading.
mhm,
And Travis, you and I have talked about this before, where in relationships, we sometimes as women, I don't know, we're very intuitive. We tend to innately kind of know, like, oh, this needs to be done. We're always like a step ahead, and then sometimes we think our partner should know, like, and I've heard other women tell me, like, if he loved me, he would know that this needs to be done, or he would do this for me.
mm,
And the book covers mind reading, and how unhealthy it is, and that if you need something, that the other person is not a mind reader, and you need to verbalize it, you need to vocalize it so that it gets done, or
mm,
that they become aware of it, because we are not all wired the same. So there's just been like several gems in these books that
mm.
just like, it's a great, excellent book. I highly recommend it. I will do my best. I have to. Travis, are you signed up with the Amazon affiliate program?
Yes, I should probably add
Yes.
that to my
Well,
thing, yeah.
here's what happens with me. I sign up. No one really uses my link, so it expires, and then I have to rejoin.
Yeah.
So I have to rejoin, but I'll put a link in the description for these books because they're phenomenal. Okay,
Yeah.
back to our programming. That was a non-sponsored, like.
Yeah, that's right, that I see, just to quickly confirm that the relational kind of mind reading, oh, that's so common, and often working with couples, I say the same thing. It's like, you might get it right, and you probably will. I mean, eventually, you'll get to know your partner and, um, might be able to predict to some degree. I mean, that's being in tune with your partner. However, if it comes to you, though, and you need something, it's all about stating that need. So it's in a way, it's like giving your partner like a soft pitch, right? It's, you're not doing a fastball at their face, right? It's because what happens is sometimes we'll do this fastball at our partner's face and get upset when they miss it, or they duck and they don't get it. It's like, no, you want to give it something that they can receive, and then they can actually catch, so to speak, and give it back to you. Because it's surprising what happens when couples begin to ask their needs and state it clearly. Most people tend to be quite receptive and say, "Yeah, I could do that." But I think we just get stuck in this, like, if they love me, it's an interesting thing we get stuck in, is like this assumption that they don't love you if they don't get it. And yeah, I mean, that's also very common. So I'm often dispelling that myth big time with individuals and couples that I work with. It's like, you know what, that's a thing, but that's actually not. No one teaches that as far as how we're trained. I mean, there's no data or science to show that that's actually even close to being accurate. So in fact, it shows, like, you is like, just state your needs, ask, be clear. So I could definitely speak to that. In I've worked with well over 1,000 people, and that's definitely something that's quite common. So even
And
within families.
giving your partner the benefit of the doubt, like, a lot of times the
Oh
way
yeah,
they explain things is like, "Oh, they're doing this to spite me," or they're doing, like,
yeah.
they just did it. It's not, most of the time, it's not an ill intention. Like, they
No.
went over their head, or their
Mhm.
mind is elsewhere.
And often, and oh gosh, we're already down this path. I don't want to get too far. But another reason why the individual might do that is there's probably various reasons why, whether it's past, they have been hurt in some way, and so it's a defense mechanism. Often it's that defensive, I don't want to get hurt. So in a way, it's the individual person keeping them safe. Like, well, they must not love me because they don't do this. So it's like their brain's looking for any signals of danger or threat. And so it
Mhm.
automatically predicts saying, this is a threat, this is a danger, keep yourself protected. Like this is kind of happening subconsciously, but it's like, don't trust
Mhm.
because you've been hurt or risk of being hurt. And so in a way, it then creates like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then you start acting in a way that might elicit a response from your partner in a way that might align with that way of thinking. Um, until you start to realize, ooh, I'm part of my own problem when I do this with my partner, that I'm actually creating this a little bit, not entirely, but a little bit, because I'm not doing this. I'm not actually opening up. I'm staying in my own little kind of safe bubble. I may not think that. I'm like, I think I might being very clear with my eye movement or my body language, or like he should
Mhm.
know. I've hinted, I've shown things. It's like, but I actually haven't been clear.
Uh-huh.
Um, so that's a whole other interesting, rabbit trail, but I don't want to go
Yeah.
down too deep. But really, there's a reason that serves a purpose. It's often a survival defense as well, that thinking. But
Mhm.
it often, more often, the reality is it's going to create more suffering for you. So once you realize that, start just sharing.
Yeah,
Just
and the
do.
last thing I'll say, and then we can get back on track, is like, or sometimes it's the person's issue. Like, for example, I have
Hmm.
ADHD, my husband has ADHD, and we manifest ADHD differently. But like, he's very, so part of ADHD is being forgetful. I forget. He remembers our anniversary dates. I forget them. Doesn't mean I don't care. I don't love him. I just forget dates, and that's been an issue in past relationships where they interpret that as like, oh, she doesn't care about me. She doesn't even remember our anniversary, and it's like,
Hmm.
that's my issue. That's my fault that I don't remember. But it doesn't
Right.
mean anything. It's not anything on you. And then
Right.
with him, like if I ask him to do something, he forgets because he's forgetful, or he will just various things. But I know it's, if you can remember, it's part of their ADHD.
Mm,
It's not that they're it has no reflection on like your relationship. That's his issue. That's my issue that I can't remember dates. And it helps if you kind of know someone's diagnosis and you're just like, okay, that's part of their condition. Let me offer them some grace.
mm, mm. Yeah. No, I think that's spot on. Yeah, it's different for everybody, and it might manifest or look slightly different, and how the person's wired. I mean, some people are great with dates. Some people I'm horrible at dates.
Hmm.
Horrible. I have to write them down in a calendar. I don't remember dates. My wife, she knows dates. I don't. I've always struggled with dates for whatever reason. So I use my calendar to solve that problem for me as well. So I think it's a good thing. Um, I guess jumping in um, to I guess the list, right? Let's just jump
Sure.
right in. So starting with number one, and this is in no, I mean, this is really a list from David Byrne's book, and this is not in any order of um, worse to worser. It's not even a word. It's just a list. So the first one, he calls it all or nothing thinking. You might be familiar with it. If you are, give a thumbs up or whatnot. But really, it's really where you evaluate as an individual your qualities in extremes, like black or white. Like it's, I'm either the worst or I'm the best. Like if I, like for example, like on a test, let's say,
Hmm.
um, you didn't get that 100%. So you got like a 95. Well, I'm a failure. I'm the worst, right? It's, um, I didn't get the 100, so I missed this, so therefore I suck, or so we do this, like we take everything and it's like it has to be this, and rarely, if ever, do you fall into that perfect all or nothing category. And it's an easy one to get stuck into, is this all or nothing thinking. It's we evaluate this all the time, especially how we see ourselves, and it's very negative. So that's the first one, is all or nothing thinking. Um,
I
second,
definitely, I see that one with students, even personally
mm,
myself, especially like I've just been very hard on myself always. And it's like, if I did not get that A, right?
mhm.
And it was
Yeah,
like, I might as well have failed. Like it's
yeah,
either A or nothing. Like,
yeah, A or nothing, or I'm a failure. Not
mm.
even that I failed, right? Often there's that shame piece,
And
right? I
that's
don't
even
know.
worse when you internalize the
Yeah.
event as I'm the failure versus I
Mhm.
failed.
Right. Right. Because yeah. And so and it also too, with all or nothing thinking, we can't even look at what we've done well. We can't even see it. It's like that's filtered out completely. You know, even acknowledging what you did well is like you can't. especially if you're stuck in this if this is really sticky for you, it's going to be really hard to see it. And often when I work with clients that do this, I try to help them have perspective of, are you actually a failure? Is this is what it means, right? And they're like, well, no. But it's like they have this internal battle going on because they still believe that they are, because and they have this rationalization, which we'll get to. But the next one is overgeneralization. And this is where we kind of randomly, arbitrarily just have a conclusion that this one thing happened, whatever that might be, and it will occur over and over and over and over again. So, example of this, would be like if you go on a date and you're turned down early, or if you just turn down, that it might conclude like, I'm going to be lonely for the rest of my life, or miserable. So because it's one person turned you down, or the second person. Another real one that I've worked with people is like when they're going and looking for a job. Well, that job, they didn't hire me, so I'm never going to get a new job. And it's funny, you're going to actually hear that these tend to piggyback, almost domino sometimes. I could even show you, like, it could be like, I could show you how overgeneralization, all nothing thinking piggyback, because often they kind of do that. It's like, well, I'm never going to get a job because I'm a failure, or I'm not smart enough, or so you hear both types of thinking in two different thought patterns right away. They kind of domino into each other and fall, which is why these get so sticky, because you kind of get stuck in this like negative thinking spiral that you can't get out of. So that's another one I hear all the time, especially with jobs lately. I work with a lot of people looking for new jobs, and it's hard to get in a job, especially in this market. Even though they say there's a lot of people hiring, they get to cherry pick who they want, and so people look for jobs, they don't get it, and they get stuck automatically. It's like, well, it's because I didn't do enough, or I'm a failure, or I'm not smart enough, or I'm never going to find something. I'm going to be stuck at this job forever, and so it just creates this negative loop for them.
And then sometimes what we do with patients that are stuck in this is, even with the all or nothing, we'll say, let's think of a time when you, like you were saying, like they discount the positive. So
Mm-hmm.
let's think about a time where you excelled, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or with have you been in relationships in the past? Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And maybe they're the ones that ended the relationship. So the antidote is kind of discounting this negative distortion and showing them that there have been times where it's been false, like what they're
Right.
thinking. In their mind, they think that
Mm-hmm.
this is factual. So if we can turn it around and make it seem like, you know what, this actually is false. Like this
Mm-hmm.
isn't accurate.
Yeah.
We start to pick away at that. And that's why cognitive behavioral therapy is so effective, because I'm a big champion for CBT, because we can give you medication and it'll help. But if we don't change the way you're
Yeah.
thinking,
It won't change anything. No.
you're going to fall back into these traps.
Yeah. Medication does not change how you think.
Mhm.
It does. It doesn't. Let me just put it this way: it does not change your belief systems.
Mhm.
And you're right that medication might help with some of the depression or anxiety from this, but if you don't change the root, it's not going to pull the weed out, so to speak. It's like it might cut the weed out the tip at the top, but if you don't take care of the root system, it's just going to keep growing back. So that's what this is like, you're really getting to the root of where does this belief system come from. And there's more layers to this too in CBT. Like, this is just the negative ways of thinking, but it goes into how our belief systems and things like that. But yeah, Bridget's absolutely right. Like, we got to get at the root, and these things, they it's really easy to get stuck in these forms of thinking, especially when we're depressed. In fact, I think Aaron Beck or David Burns, I can't remember. Oh, David Burns in this. He's like, when you're depressed, um, people possess the remarkable ability to believe, and to get people around you to believe things that have no basis in reality. It's like he calls it like we're like the magician. We could pull a magic trick when we're depressed, or because it's like our whole way of thinking completely shifts, and this way of thinking becomes truth. I'm putting this in quotes, because it's so believable, and we almost convince ourselves it's true. So I like that image of, like, it's like we're a magician creating our own magic trick in our head.
Mhm.
And so, and Bridget's right, pointing it out with clients is super helpful, but that takes time, because even when I pointed out initially with people, it's almost like They still can't take it in because there's so much belief around it that, well, that was just a one-time occurrence, right? Or we intellectualize it too. It's like, well, that was a different, that doesn't count. Or yeah, that's
Exactly.
true,
Like,
but
that's what I experience a lot. They'll say things like, if it's a test, they'll say, well, everybody could have passed that test. That was an easy test.
right.
They just want their positives.
What's funny because you start to hear how entrenched we get stuck in this way of thinking of how it's like our brain's really trying to keep this truth true. And anytime we try to put a crack in it, it's like, well, no, 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 no. Or I'm the only one. And I often say to people, I'm like, so you're the one person, you're that special, right? And people, like, they get a smile because they can't not smile. I'm like, yeah, that's so, but it takes time. It takes practice. It takes patience. So the third one's mental filter. And this is where we pick out one negative thing in any situation. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a test. It could be, maybe an interview we went on, or a date we went on. But we take one negative detail and we focus on that exclusively. And therefore, the entire situation or event we then view through that particular negative detail, that lens. So then the whole thing becomes negative. So for example, you're in an interview and let's say you forgot a particular way of answering a question. Well, then that becomes how you remember the event, is that because that question you feel you did not answer it accurately, or, in a way maybe that was perfect, right? All or nothing thinking. That then becomes the one thing you pick out, and therefore the whole interview was horrible. The entire thing was a wreck. Or on a date, maybe it's like, you feel, that I don't know.
Let's say it was going great, and then you spilled your drink on yourself, and you're like,
Right.
"Oh my god, I
Yeah.
messed up the whole day," and you
And
were
then everything.
time
Yeah.
before.
Everything is through that they must not like me because I was such a klutz. And then, that they're never going to want to call me back. And then, right. So you're already hearing the domino of that going from mental filter to negative to overgeneralization to all or nothing thinking. So these really flow in each other quickly. Hopefully you're hearing that as I'm saying this. And then you get stuck again. So that's mental filter. It's really, you pick out the one negative detail, or, the one thing you missed on the test. Why didn't he get this one thing right? So I failed. So I got a 99, but this one question, and I'm such a loser. I'm such an idiot. I'm such a, fill in the blank. So it's that one thing, and that becomes how you remember it. And that's also the emotions that follow, how you feel about it. So it's not that like I did 99% great. It was, no, I did 1%, and that becomes the 100%. So that's mental filter. The fourth, which sounds, it's going to be very similar, is called disqualifying or discounting the positives. So I like it how David Burns describes it. It's like we have the ability to transform even a neutral situation, even something that's neutral, into extremely negative. He calls it the spectacular mental illusion. So instead of just filtering out or ignoring positive information when it occurs, we say it's a fluke or it doesn't count. It's like, well, that doesn't count. Like, in fact, Bridget and I just talked about this. Like, oh, that doesn't count. That was a one-off. So that positive didn't really count. Or that test I passed, it doesn't really count because I was in high school. Or that interview, well, that didn't count because I was, my mid-20s, or whatever it might be. We just completely just discount anything that's good. And we still focus on that one negative, like the mental filter. And then we overgeneralize, and then we get stuck in the all or nothing thinking. Again, hopefully you're picking up on what's happening here. Is it's quickly these things fall into each other within a couple thoughts. It's just like boom, 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 as a domino effect. So that's disqualifying the positives, disqualifying them. Anything on that, Bridget, you want to say?
No, I'm just wanted to say, like, the reason why this is so important is because the way that the story that you tell yourself can just have such an effect on your life. So for example, if like I've just seen so much road rage lately. So if someone cuts you off, and this is kind of a little bit off topic with the cognitive distortions, but if somebody cuts you off, you can either tell yourself like, oh, they probably didn't see me, they were distracted, or you can be like, oh, they're trying to get me, they're coming after me. If you take everything personal, I think you just have this rage and anger within you. It's just when you explain to yourself, like, maybe they were distracted, maybe I was in their blind spot. There's life is too short to be so angry about things. So this is why learning these things is so important, so that you're not sad, you're not depressed, or you're not just
Mhm.
like simmering in anger.
Yeah, no, I agree. No, I agree. The story we tell ourselves does matter. In fact, I'd say, whether people have quote unquote depression or quote unquote anxiety or whatever it might be, um, the beliefs we have about ourselves and how we tell it really is the core issue I see with most clients that I work with. In
Mhm.
fact in fact, that can cause depression. That can cause severe anxiety or anxiety
Mhm.
disorder is the way we think, because then that makes sense why you're gonna be depressed if you believe this about yourself, like, that
Yeah, if
makes
you
sense.
believe you're worthless every day, you tell
Right,
yourself that, of course it's gonna
totally.
bring you down.
Right, or anxiety if you're that worried how people think about you, you're so constantly so some of these mental health disorders are not all and not always just, um, a chemical imbalance. Now, there are people that have true chemical imbalances, and sometimes it's even situational or based upon ways of thinking, because you could think this, and that can start to change how how your brain starts to function, by the way, how your body starts to feel. So there's the power of the mind, and the mind is extremely powerful for good as well as for, well, creating some suffering and some pain. Um, so it's really key that we begin to identify this, and anyone, by the way, anyone that's depressed, 100% has negative thinking patterns. There's no one I've never worked with anyone who's not depressed that does not have any of these things on this list. Never. I've never come across one person or someone with like severe anxiety. Not one person. Never, never, never. This is always somehow in there because our how we think influences us big time. Um,
Mhm.
so, and I want to say it too because it's the power of if we start to change our thinking and start to test it, not to like make stuff up. It's like, well, I'm the perfect person. No, no, no. But to be real about it and to be based on reality, that
Mhm.
begins to change our mental health, our body health, our physiological health, everything. So it really does make a difference.
Mhm.
And there's a lot of research you could look this up. Um, so that's disqualifying the positives. The next, which I think a lot of people tend to do, myself included, I've done this before quite often when I'm thinking, but it's called jumping to conclusions, right?
Mhm.
And there's two variations of this. The first, really, but in general, jumping to conclusions is exactly how it sounds. It's the process of kind of randomly, arbitrarily jumping to a negative conclusion that really has no backing by any facts. It's just, well, I'm never going to get a job again, right?
I
I'm
think Mr.
screwed.
Midwife had mentioned catastrophic thinking. So would this
Mhm.
be the one that you would call like catastrophizing?
Yes, this would be the one, catastrophizing, and in fact, catastrophizing would include, like, I think jumping to conclusions. I think disqualifying the positive and like all or nothing thinking. I think
Mhm.
Aaron Beck, because again, David Burns kind of separated some of these a bit and kind of broke them down. Even though there's some similarities, he kind of wanted to tease them out a bit more.
Mhm.
So, but this is really kind of catastrophizing, is thinking the worst, um, and jumping to that, arbitrary truth that you think is true. Um, so there's no facts though or enough facts that back this up. And the two kind of variations of jumping to conclusions is the first is mind reading, which Bridget talked about, is that we assume that other people are thinking negatively about us. That's another one. And I see this a lot of people who have kind of social anxiety disorder. Um, this is all day long for them. They're
Mhm.
constantly thinking that other people are thinking negative about them, or that they think they're going to be that people are going to view them as being stupid or an idiot or
Internal monologue is something like, "Oh, look at them looking at me. They must think
yes,
I'm such a
I
weird.
must think,
Look at what
yeah,
I'm wearing. Oh, I didn't wear the right shoes." Like,
right,
that is all
yeah.
the time in their head, and of course, that's
Yeah.
what's giving them social anxiety.
Right, exactly, is their thinking, and their thinking is exactly that's all social anxiety is. They're thinking about this, and therefore, they're, like, doing this around people. It's like, well, they must be thinking this. This must be what they're thinking, not that they've already, in a way, made it up their mind that that's what people are thinking, and therefore, they go into a room. Well, of course, you're gonna be anxious, like, especially if you don't have a really strong sense of self, that you're gonna crumble to that, and then what happens is with social anxiety is you then avoid going out. You avoid seeing
Mr.
people.
Midwife says, I read minds all the time. I'm really bad about that. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I was going to
So
say, oh, I can't remember where I read it, but I do remember reading that, if you have social anxiety, like most people are so worried about themselves,
yeah,
they're not
totally.
even thinking about
They're
you.
not even thinking. No, that's so true. Most people I would say are more self-absorbed, and they're also anxious about how people view them, which is so fascinating. Um, you know, I would say when you get healthier, when this starts to not be so, when this way of thinking starts to not keep you trapped, what you'll find when you start to get on the other end of this and start to have a healthier view of yourself, um, in the world, how you see yourself, you actually have the capacity to have empathy and patience for other people that might be struggling with this, where actually what you're thinking about them is empathy. It's like, man, I
Mhm.
can't, man, how can I help them? Like, they must be struggling. I want to be there with them and sit with them and show them that they don't have to be afraid. Like, you start to, it's not that you're thinking negatively about them. It's you actually have empathy for them. You have care for them. You have patience. You have grace. You have an awareness that, wow, people are struggling and I used to struggle and I can actually maybe hopefully help this person along their way. So it's in fact, the exact opposite. Now, are there people that are going to think negatively of you? Well, sure. Okay. I'd say, who cares?
Mhm.
There's always going to be someone, but
Mhm.
that's really about them anyway. If they're that negative, it's more an internal reflection of how they view themselves anyway, and that's a whole psychological thing,
Another
tangent. But
another quote that I like is like, I don't remember who said it, but the only way to not have people basically talk about you is to say nothing, be nothing, do nothing, so that's not
Mhm.
realistic at all.
No, no, it's not at all. People are always going to talk, and they're going to jump to their own conclusions, and often if it's negative, I would argue that that's really more reflection of their fears, their worries, their negative belief systems that they're projecting onto you anyway. Most
Mhm.
of the time, I would say.
Exactly, and if you
So
can internalize that, like, it's this more issue with them versus me, that would
totally.
save you so much trouble.
Oh, totally, totally. Or, hey, you know what? Most people in this room probably are feeling the same way. So how do I just kind of just let that go and think differently? So, and this takes time. And again, there's often reasons why these things start these ways of thinking. By the way, again, there's often other roots. Things have happened, whether it's real or perceived, that we may have to kind of unpack or heal from. By the way, so there's some other work sometimes, but um, that's probably a different um, live stream episode on how to heal, because there's a lot. But the next would be magnifying or minimizing. Again, some of these they're very much exactly how it sounds. Do I magnify? Do I minimize? So that's really um, he calls it the binocular trick, right? Looking through binoculars, kind of looking at it, magnifying, minimizing that, because of what we'll do is we'll take a imperfection, a fear, an error, a mistake, and we exaggerate it. We exaggerate all those negatives. So we exaggerate all the ways we've messed up, or our weaknesses, while we minimize our strengths. Again, so it's kind of this we magnify the negatives as we minimize our strengths. So we're coming into view all those negatives as we decrease our view on our positives, on our good qualities. So it's this kind of magnification, the zooming in and zooming out effect. Um, Again, which sounds like some of the other ones we've already talked about, but it's just a different perspective, a way of thinking it. And the next one would be emotional reasoning, which is really, it's all, we take emotions, how we feel, and we base truth off of a feeling. So, I feel this way, therefore it must be true. Like, I feel like a failure, therefore I must be a failure. I feel like they don't find me attractive, therefore I must be unattractive. I feel, right? Um, I
That is a
feel,
huge revelation that feelings are not facts,
no, they're not. They're not facts at all.
but so many people take them as facts.
They do. Oh, most people I work with, I would say, also most people I work with, I have to first teach them to separate how to identify what a thought is versus a feeling. Most people tend to blur those and don't. They're like, no, that's not a feeling; it's a thought. So I have to help them see, no, this is a feeling, this is a thought. So let's like get the feelings out, get the thoughts out, so you can see the differences between the two. And feelings are not based on facts. They can be, but they're
Mhm,
not facts.
mhm,
Feelings themselves are not facts; they're just emotions. And I say, what are feelings? They're kind of road signs. They're signposts. They're trying to get your attention. Now they can be based on facts, And if they are, we need to identify that. Or they're based on perception. And if they are, we need to identify that too. But emotional reasoning, a lot of people get stuck in that. Again, it's that facts or feelings thing. And really it's helping them kind of slow down. Okay, what's this feeling? And what's the thought driving it? Often I'm having them breathe. Okay, here's a feeling, but what are the thoughts that are driving this feeling or feelings?
Exactly. That
There's
thought,
often
that
thoughts.
feelings follow thoughts. And
Yeah.
that is exactly why this is so important.
Yeah. And it's teasing that out. And then, he's kind of giving you already how to fix it, is looking at what are the facts, and we could talk about that later. But the next is should statements. This is another classic one. It's this: I should do this, or I should have done this, or I must do this. We get stuck in this. It's like we're looking at past events, and we're beating ourselves up for what we should have done. And that's very common. So we often get frustrated. We get frustrated toward ourselves, and we kind of shame ourselves and bully ourselves internally because we didn't do something. I should have done this and I didn't. And what's wrong with me? And like we kind of go over it and over again, which just continues to raise up feelings of anxiety, sadness, depression. Like it kind of brings this stuff up again, and we kind of sit in it. It's like sitting in like, you're rolling in manure over and over again. Another thing I say, I did not come up with this. I have no idea who, but it could have been a professor of mine, but I use it all the time, is that I say, stop shitting on yourself, right? Which always gets a laugh, because you think about it like, yeah, like stop shitting on yourself, because that's what we do. And once you get the laugh, you realize, oh, I'm shitting on myself. Okay. Yep.
Mhm.
Okay. Stop that. So it's little helpful ways to think differently, because those shoulds they're going to keep you stuck, because the reality is you cannot change what you did in the past. You can't. Let it go. Identify what you did, identify what you would like to do differently, and then begin to do it.
Mhm.
And then once you start doing the should, say, oh, I'm doing the shoulds again. Stop, pause, let it go. I can't change the past. What can I learn from the past to change in the future?
Mhm.
But it's amazing how quickly we get stuck in that. And we think that it's going to help us by doing that, but it actually just makes us more down. So that's the should statements. The next would be labeling, and or mislabeling. So this is the process of labeling ourselves, right? So I am an idiot, right? I am a failure. I am not enough. It's often always, it's never helpful. It's always negative when we're stuck in this way. And how David Burns describes it, that this is an extreme form of overgeneralization. Another way I think labeling, or how I see it, is shame. Is like, it's a shame message. Like, 'cause shame is, difference between guilt and shame is guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am wrong, right? It's that self-prescription of a negative view that you are a failure versus you failed. Like Bridget said earlier, it's like, not only did I fail, but I'm a failure. So
Mhm.
that's labeling. That's the shame piece. That's one step further than a behavior, because now you are this thing,
Mhm.
right? Or I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm hopeless. It's often these negative labels, which is this really this core belief, which often you'll conclude as to why the date didn't want to date you again, or
Mhm.
what you'll conclude as to why you failed that test, or why you didn't get hired. So it's more of a core belief, I think, of CBT, is this labeling. And it's often in a negative way. Rarely ever, if ever, I've never heard anyone coming in my office that's struggling where it's been a positive label.
I know,
Um,
isn't that interesting?
it's never been a positive label. It's always negative.
I've
Um,
only had one patient that had, normally with schizophrenia, and they have auditory hallucinations.
yeah.
It'll be very negative things. I've only had one person that had one positive auditory hallucinations, and
Mm,
he's on medication, but he still hears the voices. But it was kind of cute to hear. He
mm,
was, I'll just call him John Doe. He'd be like, and he would verbalize them. He'd be like, "Let's go, John Doe. We can do it. Yeah, we're gonna have a good day."
yeah.
Like, yeah, and he's always happy because he's these happy voices in
Yeah.
his head.
Hey, I wouldn't mind I working with an individual with a little more positive ones in their heads. I'd rather have that. Well, I've heard some other positive labeling too. People in like a manic state.
Oh,
Um,
true.
it's like an extreme,
Yeah, they're
you know,
grandiose.
very grandiose, very extreme. Where is it I guess it's more of a positive message, but it's still
It's
not helpful.
destructive though, because
It
then they'll
yeah,
have like,
it's distorted.
they'll wipe out their bank accounts,
Yeah,
or,
yeah.
so yeah, that's
Or they'll
definitely how we
make
were
a
talking about a chemical imbalance.
Yeah.
That's definitely where they need to be on medication to balance out the
Yeah.
depression and the manic
Yeah. Oh,
mania.
yeah. So but typically, I'd say most of the people outside of those extreme, a little more severe mental illnesses, most people come in and it's all negative. It's never positive, at least in the beginning.
Yes, and I wanted to point out that I get a lot of people that come to me and they'll be like, "I think I have bipolar," but, not to discount it, but keep in mind that bipolar is maybe only around 3%. It's very rare.
It is.
So, of course, we'll listen to you, we'll take a history, and if you do have it, we'll believe you, but,
Yeah.
it's not likely that a lot of people think bipolar means, like, moodiness or things like
Yeah.
that, and that's not bipolar.
No, people misuse terms all the time. I mean, which I can understand that. I mean, people say, "Oh, they're so bipolar," or "They're so schizophrenic," or "They're so." We have these sayings that people say. And it's like that's actually
Mhm.
not it. Not
Yeah,
even close.
yeah.
Or you're not bipolar. You're not
Or
actually.
or
Um,
antisocial, that's my pet
yeah,
peeve when people are like, "I'm so antisocial." I'm like,
you're
"No,
actually not.
you're"
Um, you're not. Uh, so, and that's just education. It's just it's the lack of education and understanding, which that's partly why my job exists, I guess.
Mhm,
And the last one, the last two, you put into one category is personalization and blame. Personalization and blame. So, personalization is again another unhelpful way of thinking, where you assume responsibility for something that you have no responsibility of ever taking on. Uh, where maybe let's say something happened to a friend, um, you blame yourself for the bad thing that happened to your friend. You personalize it that somehow you are responsible. Here's a classic one for kids. My parents divorced because of me.
mm,
I'm the reason why my parents divorced.
mhm,
I didn't I couldn't keep them together, right? That's a classic one that kids do, um, or teens that they then bring into adulthood and they do other things. They do that in other areas of life. Um, I do work with a lot of teens and I hear it all the time, man. These teenagers, they blame themselves for their other friends' stuff. Uh, I had one kid blame herself for her other friend, you know, hurting herself and harming herself. So she blamed herself for that, that she was the reason that she could have stopped it. It's like, well, no, that's not your responsibility.
mhm,
You have no power over that. So, but it's amazing how that way of thinking though can be so detrimental because then they get stuck in the shoulds, right? Oh, I should have
mhm,
done this, and then they blame themselves. Well, I wasn't enough. I couldn't stop it, and so we start to it's this
and that
spiral.
guilt just weighs on you so much.
Totally, but it's unhealthy guilt. It's not even realistic.
Mhm,
But it's such a they believe it as truth. It's this true thing, and they carry it like this heavy burden, it's like tied around their neck. They can't even move.
mhm,
So that's a big one. Personalization is huge. And then they blame themselves, right? It's this bias that you somehow believe you have influence and control over others, right? It's my fault that I could have stopped them from doing X, Y, and Z, which is actually not true. But it's amazing the power of this way of thinking and really how big of a weight it puts on the individual. And it's really, left unchecked, it could be very detrimental. And I've worked with some teens. I'm saying teens because I feel like teens really get stuck in this one, at least in my experience that I work with teens. Um, Partly, I think it's because their brain development too. As you get older, it's a little easier to kind of differentiate this. I definitely work with adults that stuck in personalization and blame, absolutely. But I feel like teens specifically, it's like because how they see the world they don't have that. It's hard to have perspective. I think where the brain's developed, it's not fully developed yet, so everything is kind of still egocentric around the individual
exactly.
self.
I was just
And
gonna say
so,
they tend to be egocentric, so therefore they kind of internalize everything as being their fault because
right.
they think everything revolves around them.
Exactly. And so that is a brain development issue, which is why you see it more. Because as you start to get older, you start to realize, "Hey, the world doesn't revolve around me." And so it's a little easier to kinda start to separate that, but yeah, teens big time, man. This is one I feel like all the time they're in my office, like, this is a big one they carry, especially in our day and age with all the stuff, you know, um, being it's yeah, anyway, we're not that's a tangent, but yeah, this is the 10 list. This is the top 10 list, and, I'm curious as we were talking, as you're thinking about it, maybe, keeping a list of yourself, what you relate to, and again, I wanna reiterate that if you relate to all of these, that's actually a good thing. And I say that because then you now have language, you have a weapon to begin to fight and to begin to say, ooh, that's a should statement, or ooh, I'm discounting the positives, or ooh, I'm labeling, or I'm personalizing and I'm blaming self, or I'm all or nothing thinking. So it starts to give you a separation from that way of thinking. So that's really the first step, is awareness. I teach everyone is you have to be aware of how your thinking is kind of misaligned, so to speak. And so the first step is learning these things and starting to pay attention to when you notice them in your head. It's like, oh, there it is. And don't even change it initially. Like, just start to pay attention, and almost like imagine you're labeling and putting a sticker on all these ways of thinking when you start to have that thought. It's like, ooh, this thought, oh, that's all or nothing thinking. Oh, this thought, I'm jumping to conclusions. Oh, this thought, I'm overgeneralizing. Oh, this thought, so you're starting to kind of see it for what they are. And that begins to give you a little bit of space. And then you can start to do other things. And I'm thinking we could probably have a second episode on just all ways of changing our thinking. But the first step is just paying attention and noticing when it's there.
Yeah, I would say if you feel like you don't do any of these, that would be a cause for concern because then that means that you don't have the insight to realize what you're
Hmm.
doing that is unhealthy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The reality is, now, do I get stuck in this way of thinking now in my life? Not really. I don't really get stuck in it. But I notice when these thoughts come, because they still do.
Mhm.
Um, they do. I mean, it's amazing. Like, I get the should still come up for me. Like, if I, especially as a parent, oh my gosh, oh my Lord, well, I shouldn't have done that. And now I learn not to beat myself up from it, because I
Mhm.
learn, okay, next time I need to work on this myself when I'm with, if I'm with my kids. Like, let's say I lost my patience, let's say, for example, and let's say I raised my voice because I got frustrated. I could get stuck in the shoulds and say, God, I'm such a terrible father. I'm such a terrible person. What's wrong with me? I'm the worst therapist in the world. Like, I know this. I should be better, right? I should be better. I'm not enough. I'm a failure. Like, I could go down that path. And it's not hard to. It's actually, it's literally, it's a split second decision of going down that path in your head. But
Mhm.
I've learned from a lot of practice and a lot of awareness and a lot of health is that no, like, that's one way of thinking. No, the reality is I'm a person. The reality is I made a mistake. The reality is actually I'm tired. It's been a long week. It's not an excuse for maybe getting frustrated and raising my voice, but it's understanding in context, saying, okay, I need to work on that. I need to not raise my voice. And now I need to take responsibility to my kids. Say, hey, Dad, sorry, should not have raised his voice. He was frustrated. That's not okay. I'm allowed to be frustrated, but what should Dad do? And my kids will say, take a breath. Yeah, exactly. I should have taken a breath. You're right. Or count to 5. You're right. My kids know this stuff. It's great. And so, and I'd help them because I show that it's not about being perfect, but it's about learning and working and being aware. And when you make a mistake, taking responsibility,
Mhm.
giving yourself grace and love, healing from it and moving on.
Mhm.
And so I share these come up for me still, but I'm more quickly to stop them. I know their tactics, so to speak. So it's easier for me to identify and to move on from them and to heal from them. So you're right. We all somewhere along the line, this will come up for you. So it's about awareness. It's about healing. And it's about moving forward. So, um, yeah, this is the top 10 list of the negative ways of thinking or cognitive distortions.
Thank you so much. So, like he said before, drop a comment below. Let us know which unhealthy cognitive distortion you engage in. Is it all or nothing thinking, overgeneralization, mental filter, disqualifying the positives, jumping to conclusions, magnification, minimization, emotional reasoning, should statements, labeling and
Mm,
mislabeling, or personalization and blame?
yeah.
Check out Travis at his channel, Travis Goodman, and also let us know what kind of topics you would like to see
Yeah.
in the comments.
Ooh, and come back and comment on this channel. Give it a week. Here's the thing. I'll see who will do this. Give yourself a week and notice which ones you do, and come back and comment. Say, "Ooh, I realize that of this list, here are the ones I really tend to do." Like, think of the top 2 or 3 that you do, and come back and comment and drop them in and say. And think of it as like a group, like a group effort of trying to heal and try
Mhm.
to hold each other accountable. That there's no shame in this. No, there's no shame. Get it. I say, get it in the light. Once it's in the
Mhm.
light and you shine a big flashlight on it, it's harder for it to hide. This stuff likes to hide in the darkness, and when it's not out in the open, it
Mm.
likes to be kind of hidden in the dark crevices of our minds. So when we put it out there, it's actually a little easier, and you feel a little freedom. So yeah, come back and comment in a week which ones you find yourself doing, and just like share it. So it's going to give other people hope to say they're not so alone. So,
Exactly. Make sure that you hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and make sure you turn on that notification bell. Until next time.